Loveland's Frogman. In March of 1972, on 2 separate occasions, 2 Ohio policemen saw what has become known as the Loveland Frogman. Fortin investigators Ron Schaffner and Richard Mankey, who interviewed the officers investigated these incidences. The first incident took place at 1 a.m. on March 3rd, 1972. On a clear, cold night, Officer Ray was en route in Loveland via Riverside Road when he thought he saw a dog beside the roadway in a field. But then the thing stood up. Its eyes illuminated by the car lights, looked at him for an instant, turned and leapt over the guardrail. Ray saw it go down the embankment and into the Little Miami River. He described the thing as weighing about 60 pounds, standing about 3 or 4 feet tall, and having a textured, leathery skin and a face like a frog or lizard. Ray drove to the police station and returned with Officer Mark Matthews to look for evidence of the creature. They turned up scrape marks leading down the side of a small hill near the river. Then on St. Patrick's Day, March 17, 1972, Officer Matthews was driving outside Loveland when he had a similar experience, seeing an animal laying in the middle of the road. He stopped to remove what he thought was a dead critter. Instead, when the officer opened his squeaky car door, the animal got up into a crouched position like a football player. The creature then hobbled to the guardrail, lifted its leg over the fence, keeping an eye on Matthews the whole time as it jumped over. Lake Hope Furnace. The purpose of the Lake Hope Furnace was to process the iron ore that was gathered from the area's sandstone bedrock. The furnace operated 24 hours a day, and records show that at the height of its operation, the Lake Hope Furnace was churning out close to 15 tons of cast iron a day. In order to ensure the furnace continued operating at night, watchmen were employed to tend to the furnace's fires. These watchmen were also responsible for keeping an eye on the engine house and to also protect against people falling into the furnace. It is said that at night these watchmen would light lanterns to aid them in making their rounds, which often took them up along the platform at the top of the furnace. One fateful night, there were several versions of what actually happened. One says that the night was particularly rainy and stormy. The watchman, while walking along the platform with his lantern, slipped in the darkness and fell into the bubbling ore inside the furnace. Another version has the man being frightened by a bolt of lightning causing him to fall. But perhaps the best-known version of this story, and the most romanticized, has the worker battling his way through a fierce storm in order to make his rounds. The watchman refused to keep from his rounds and wouldn't wait for the impending storm to pass. As he made his rounds, lightning flashed around him, creeping closer with each strike. As the story goes, the watchman was finally struck by a bolt of lightning and then fell into the furnace. While it is impossible to determine if the man was killed by the lightning or the ensuing fall, all agree that not even death has been able to keep the watchman from his rounds. It's said that on particularly stormy nights, the ghostly watchman returns to make his rounds. There have been dozens of reports of a dark figure carrying a lantern, walking along the top of Lake Hope Furnace. Some have said that the figure continues pacing back and forth across the furnace until lightning strikes close by, which causes the figure to disappear until the next stormy night. Gore Orphanage. It's said that the Gore Orphanage was in operation sometime in the 1800s. A mysterious fire started in the building that quickly engulfed the entire structure. Lining up all the usual suspects from all different versions, the likely cause of the fire was one of the following. Old Man Gore, the owner of the orphanage, who was either attempting to collect some sort of insurance money or simply hated children. A disgruntled male employee. While he is never named, this shady character had some sort of beef with the orphanage owner, Mr. Gore, and decided to extract his revenge. An unknown crazy man. Again, this figure is never named. All that's known about him was that he lived in the woods surrounding the orphanage and hated all the noise that the kids made. An accident. The most common version of the accident story is one of the orphans accidentally knocked over a lantern. In another version, the lantern was kicked over in a nearby barn, but the fire quickly spread to the main building of the orphanage. Regardless of how the fire first started, the results were catastrophic. Presumably, none of the orphans were able to escape the blaze, and they all perished. In the aftermath, authorities took away Mr. Gore's license and refused to allow a replacement orphanage to be constructed on the site. Nearby townspeople wanted nothing more than to quickly forget about the tragedy and simply raise the remains of the burnt-out shell of the orphanage and allow nature to take its course and reclaim the land. Out of sight, out of mind. But such a tragic event isn't going to fade so easily. And in this case, the tragic fire somehow left a stain on the area. Locals began whispering that if you ventured out to the remains of the Gore Orphanage at night, you would see the ghostly shapes of the dead orphans running around, playing in the woods. Sometimes the children appeared to be on fire and yelling for help, with a foul stench of burning flesh in the air. Other late-night visitors reported seeing bright lights swirling and weaving through the woods, which they took as the ghosts of the dead children playing. Those who believed the orphanage fire had been intentionally set sometimes felt the spirit of the guilty party make an appearance at the site in the form of a dark, shadowy shape lurking near the foundation of the remains. A final occurrence at the orphanage site was people who parked and left their cars near the remains would find it covered with tiny handprints when they returned. In such an isolated area, anyone else coming to the area would quickly be discovered. The only explanation was that the ghosts of the orphans were attempting to physically push the car away from the orphanage, perhaps in a ghostly warning to stay away, lest the car owner suffer a fate similar to theirs. Helltown. Helltown is the nickname given to a former town that used to be known as Boston, Ohio. Boston was founded in 1806 and apparently thrived until 1976 when the government bought out most of the town, and the townspeople were evicted from their homes. There were plans for it to be turned into a national park. However, none of these plans actually happened, and houses remained standing, boarded up. Some stood for years until they were finally demolished. A lot of legends circulate about the former town, and although we don't actually know if these legends are based in truth, they are still pretty creepy. One legend about Helltown is Stanford Road, a steep hill and a sharp drop-off at the end of the road, leading to a barricaded dead end, which people call the end of the world. Legend says if you park there too long, you may meet your gruesome fate at the hands of many freaks supposedly patrolling the grounds. The former town cemetery, Boston Cemetery, is located deep on the grounds. The cemetery is said to be home to a ghostly man, grave robbers, and even a moving tree. Other legends include a giant snake, mutants, Satanists, escaped mental patients, and even KKK members are said to roam the grounds of Helltown. Ohio State Reformatory. One of the state of Ohio's greatest buildings is still standing just outside Mansfield, the old State Reformatory. It's been used as a set for 4 movies: Harry and Walter Go to New York, Tango and Crash, Air Force One, and of course, The Shawshank Redemption. It also was home to the music video for Awake by Godsmack. And Marilyn Manson has done plenty of photography here. The long history of the OSR began in 1861 when the field where it would be built was used as a training camp for Civil War soldiers. It was named Camp Mordecai Bartley to honor the Mansfield man who served as Ohio governor in the 1840s. In 1867, Mansfield was promoted as a candidate for the placement of the new intermediate penitentiary. The intermediate was intended as just that, a halfway point between the boys' institutional home in Lancaster and the state penitentiary in Columbus. It would house mostly young first-time offenders who might still be reformed. In 1885, Mansfield was officially selected as the site for the new intermediate, and construction began with Levi T. Scottfield as head architect. His design was intended to represent cathedral style, in the hope that the inmates might be inspired to be better people or something. No matter his intent, it ended up looking incredible. Like Dracula's castle was in northern Ohio. Work was delayed in 1888 until 1890, but on September 15, 1896, the building was opened as the Ohio State Reformatory. The first 150 prisoners were brought by train from Columbus and put immediately to work in the prison sewer system and the 25-foot stone wall that surrounded the 15-acre complex. It wasn't until 1910 that the building was completely finished. Today, OSR houses the world's largest freestanding cell block, 6 tiers high. It's said that several ghosts haunt the prison, too many to properly catalog. The most common occurrence seems to be the voices around the old superintendent's quarters, possible remnants from the Mad Dog murders, or the questionable suicide of the superintendent's wife. Chris Woodyard reports a wimpy, whiny ghost and a big, burly one, as well as 2 ghostly men fighting beside the pond, out front, and numerous apparitions in the old chapel. But she also says that one of the ghosts jumped onto her back and asked her to take him out of there. So take that as you will. Just keep an eye out for ghosts if you ever decide to visit the Ohio State Reformatory. I hope you ghouls enjoyed these Ohio urban legends. They're really fun to look into. I really liked them. I kind of thought when I first read the Gore Orphanage, I was like, where's this going? I mean, it was pretty gory. All those kids supposedly died, so that sucks. But that was the guy's name. Interesting. I really liked it. Let me know which one was your favorite in the comments below. And as always, the last video will be on the top left. The next video will be on the bottom left. All my social medias are on the screen, as well as in the description box below. And remember, there's always someone or something watching you.